Hi, everyone. It's Tech Tip Talk. I'm Sarah Walworth.
I'm Christina McGrath, and we are Knitting Tech Editors.
Here on Tech Tip Talk, we answer your questions about tech editing, knitting design, and knitting pattern writing. And we invite you now to put any questions you might have into the chat. Feel free to load us up there with your questions.
We've started interviewing other tech editors. So last month was our first interview, and this month we are interviewing Kat Walser, who is a knitting designer, teacher, and tech editor living in Australia. Kat is an excellent resource for Australian knitters and designers with her focus on local yarns and language. And she's a great resource for all of us with her self-taught knowledge, her own designs, and tech editing skills. And we're really excited to have her with us today. So let's bring her in.
All right. There she is. And let's put you in spotlight. And there she is. Hi, Kat. Welcome.
Hi, Christina.
Hi, Kat.
I'm so excited to have you here.
Yes, thank you for having me. Thank you for switching the time.
Oh, yeah.
No problem.
So you live in Australia. So right now it's morning for you and it's
11 a.m.
11 a.m. And it's evening for us. We're so glad that you could join us live because that makes it much more exciting.
Yeah, no, it's more fun.
So should we jump into questions? Are you ready?
Yeah, go for it.
So how did you begin tech editing, Kat?
Oh, okay. So when did I start? I think about 6 or 7 months ago. So I've been a designer since 2016. So I've been doing it for about 5 years. And I come from a technical background. So I was a software engineer before I started doing knitting stuff sort of more or less full time. And there's actually, okay, this is getting sort of strange, but whenever you write code for a website, people like part of the process is actually a different person checks your work. Like you can't put anything live on a website until someone else checks that you've done the right thing. And so when I started writing patterns and people were like, oh, there's this tech editing step, I was like, hey, I know what this is. I'm used to doing this for my old job. And so I just decided it was worth a shot because I'm used to checking people's work and I really like double checking the maths and everything. And so I just started reaching out and asking people if they wanted to, get some tech editing done. Because I have a network of designers who I'm friends with already. So it was pretty natural to just start reaching out to people.
That's fantastic. That sounds like an excellent segue into tech editing is to have already been a designer, because then you have that background, right? You can see things from the designer's perspective, but also from the knitter's perspective.
Mm-hmm. I was also I've been I've been test knitting for people for a long time too. And I found that whenever I had feedback, I would write my feedback up and people would be like, wow, this is really detailed. Thank you. And I was like, is that just not normally what people leave? So I think I've just always, had a little bit of a, hey, look, you can do this sort of bent.
Yeah.
Do you tech edit knitting or crochet or both?
Just knitting.
Just knitting, us too.
Yeah, so I'm not a big crocheter. I do know how to crochet. I don't know how many crochet patterns I've ever even read. Probably read 3. So I find them very confusing. So definitely just the knitting for now.
That's awesome. Crocheting is kind of its own language too. It's very different.
It's so different. So. That's why we're so upfront about it. That we don't edit crochet patterns because it's not, it's really not exactly the same. There's a lot that's specific to crochet that you need to know to edit that,
Oh, yeah. And I find that I know I haven't seen a lot of crochet patterns, but it feels like crochet patterns are a little less consistent between patterns. I feel like in knitting, and I could be completely wrong, but I feel like in knitting, once you've seen a couple, they generally have a consistent style in terms of how abbreviations work and how repetition works and stuff like that. Crochet is a little bit more confusing, especially, at least to me, especially because there's different things around how many, you can do the same stitch into one stitch And so like, does the bracket mean that you're repeating or you're doing all these stitches into the next stitch? Anyway, yeah. So I will leave that to the people who actually know what they're doing.
Same.
It is not me.
You can put that hook anywhere, so it doesn't.
Yep.
All right, so what do you love to edit and why?
Yeah, so I'm still early enough that I don't really have preferences yet. I figured when I started, sometimes this works and sometimes it doesn't, but it's worked for the tech editing. So I have this tendency to just try things and see if it works out. Sometimes I end up biting off more than I can chew. But with the editing, I was like, look, let's just see. So I told people, I'm like, I will edit anything except a jumper with set-in sleeves because I do not know how to do sleeve cut maths. If it's short rows that you've picked up around a sleeve edge, I can do it. But if it's literally like a knit flat sleeve cut, I'm like, I have no idea. But other than that, I'll do basically anything. And so I've gotten a really big range of stuff so far, but I don't know that I've seen enough of one thing to have a preference yet.
So, I know we have tech editors in our audience. We got Ruth and Heather here, and it looks like your friend from Australia is tuning in.
Yes, hi, Eddie.
So if anybody here edit set-in sleeves, you can throw your info into the comments and
yes, please.
Send all her set-in sleeves over to you.
When I first started tech editing, I did the same thing. I would only edit like seamless garments. I didn't do seam set-in sleeves either. Now I do, but when I first started, I was like, no.
Yep. Well, it's just that I haven't even knit that many of them myself because, I've got that thing that a lot of people do where it's like, I hate seaming. And so I think I've made like one jumper in my life that has set-in sleeves. So I'm like, I'm not going to edit that stuff. I've never even made it.
It totally makes
sense. I didn't feel confident about the math until I had worked with it a little more,
Yeah.
Yeah, I just I have a vague idea, but no. I need to read a couple more patterns that actually use them before I try editing them.
So Marlene asked a question in the comments that she kind of preempted what we will ask you later. So we'll ask it now if that's okay. So does Katrina have favorite software she'd recommend in the tech editing process?
Yes. Okay, so there are a couple of things. So my main preference with my designers would be if they sent me a text document before it was a PDF. So I do have some clients who send me a fully laid out PDF and things like that, but I find commenting on them a little bit difficult because like different PDF software works differently. So my preference is mostly to work in Google Docs because there is a full there's a full history of all the changes people have made, and you can make comments and suggestions and revisions and things like that. So my ideal workflow is to have people write up just the text of it in Google Docs, and then we work on it together. And then when we're fine with the actual written up part, then they can convert it into the PDF, and I do a final check of just to make sure there weren't any copy and paste errors and all the layout looks fine. And then they send that off to their testers. So definitely Google Docs, and similarly Google Sheets. So I end up sort of making a spreadsheet for them if they don't already have one, and then we can collaborate on that as well, because that way you can see each other's work pretty easily. And then the other thing that I use a lot is called Stitch Fiddle, which is the software that I've always used to chart stuff for my own designs. And so usually if anyone has a stitch pattern, I find it much easier to visualize stuff. So if I'm checking people's lace or the cables and stuff, I actually end up drawing out a chart for myself just to double check all the instructions work.
Yeah, same.
And it also then makes it really easy because if the designer hasn't charted it and they want a chart, then you're like, cool, I've already got this. Here you go. I'll clean it up a little bit and we can put it in your pattern. So those are the three main ones I use.
So we call that killing two birds with one stone in the United States. I don't know if you guys have a phrase like that, but
yes, no, we do. Yeah.
So you work together? Do you make changes onto their document, or do you just leave a comment that lets them know what change you think needs to be made?
Yeah. So it was, I had this thing when I first started where if it was a typo or just a straight out error that just needed to be fixed, I would make an edit and I would highlight it in a different color just so that they saw it. And then Google Docs has this feature, which I think may also exist in Word, where you can they call it a suggestion. So let's say there's a word that you want to change, then you delete it and it leaves the word there, but it like puts a strike.
Yeah, Word has
and then
that.
you put your like edit next to it and it like shows it in a different color. And so then that way people can come in and see what you're suggesting. And if they like it, then they just accept and it fixes it all. And if they don't like it, they just reject and it goes away.
Right.
And so I used to do both things. I would do the highlighting for the straight up errors and then the suggestions for the suggestions. But I recently moved to just doing suggestions for everything because I found people got quite confused because they didn't realize that the highlights were things that I had already changed. So I would highlight it and be like, I think you should change it to this. And they would look at that and like they didn't remember because, patterns get really, really long. You can't remember every single character you've typed in. So they thought that I was suggesting that they would change it when I had already changed it. And they'd be like, what do you need me to change? It's already like that. So I found I just switched to suggestions for everything now.
Well, I just learned a ton. I don't prefer to work in Google Docs, so this is fantastic tutorial for me.
Oh, right, yeah.
Well, track changes in Word works that way.
Yeah, it does.
But
it's not easy to share documents in Word. So Google makes it super easy to share with with another editor or with your testers.
Yeah.
And I work on PDFs where I can't change the document because I'm just annotating on top of the paper. Right. Mm-hmm. So I just will like circle and say, this change needs to be made or whatever. So
and I do. Cool. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying that it's just so interesting. There's these two different ways to do things. Yeah. And like it's cool that what you're doing can be so like, what's the word? Cooperative.
Yes. Collaborative.
Thank you. Yeah.
And because I do have some clients who do prefer to work with PDFs, so I do still do that. But then just in terms of I've seen a lot of questions in like the Tech Editor Hubs era where people are like, how do you know if people have accepted your suggestions and stuff like that? And how do you know if they've seen it and they just have decided not to and stuff? And so I find it just really a lot easier in Docs because it's literally they have to press accept or reject in the thing that you put in. And there's a history of all the changes that have been made over time. So it just makes it a lot easier to see what's going on.
Definitely. So that segues into our next question, which is, what errors do you come across the most? What have you found is the most common error?
So I think the thing I've seen the most, it's not actually an error. It's just more of a lack of knowledge. People need a lot of help figuring out yardage. Yeah. So I've done a lot of, there are some clients who I just straight up do the yardage calculations for them. And some of them where I've seen them try it and then I just have to come in and be like, okay, cool, let's break it down a little bit more fine grained and see if we can get this to be a bit more accurate and stuff like that. And so I think there just isn't a lot. It's a tricky thing to figure out.
What's your favorite way to calculate yardage? Do you use ratios or do you calculate number of stitches over?
Yeah.
Come on, give us the math.
Okay, so I don't know. Okay. One thing I need to preface all of this with, I'm entirely self-taught. I've never done any courses. I just figure it out and fudge it as I go. So I'm going to explain how I do it.
That's impressive about you, and I loved on your website how you explained how you had all these troubles and issues because you didn't teach you, and you figured it out yourself, and now you're helping other people. I mean, I think it's so impressive how much you're doing and how much you've done that you've figured out yourself. It's great.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, I think it helps, especially with designing, because I've always just had a bit of a mathsy brain, and so it's helpful. And I know how to use software and stuff, and so I've always had I can use a spreadsheet and things. So it's a little easier to be self-taught, I think, if you're just learning the concepts and you have all the tools down already. Right. But yes, okay, yardage. Okay, so what I normally do. And this is for my own designs, and then I try and do it for clients, but sometimes they've already made the sample, so it's hard to get them to weigh at the correct points. But what I normally do is I draw a schematic for myself. So let's just talk about garments. So I'll draw a schematic, and I break it down into both different stitches and different shapes. So let's say you've got a top-down garment that has like, bust, like waist shaping, for example. So I take a look and I see if there are different sections that have different stitch patterns. And then also I'll break it down into general shapes. So like a top-down garment is an hourglass, right? So it's basically two trapeziums stacked on top of each other. And so I figure out where the stitch patterns change and where the shape changes. And at each of those points, I weigh my sample as I go. And then I do ratios on each of those things. So I'll be like, all right, so this stitch pattern is just around the bottom border. So that's essentially a rectangle. So if it's in the round, say, that's like a straight rectangle around the bottom. So if it was this many grams in my size, then it's just a rectangle. So it's easy enough to calculate that out for the rest of the sizes. And then I do that for each of the general shapes. And then I add it all together at the end.
You just made my mathy heart just go, whoa. and Christina's probably like, no thanks.
I multiply and divide.
I love it. That was wonderful. That was just an excellent treatise on calculating yardage in Kat's way. We'll have a tutorial for you on her website, I'm sure.
Christina, how do you do it? I'm really curious.
I cross multiply and divide. I take the sample because I'm not a designer, so I'm not working with a sample.
Sure.
Like you are, so I don't have any physical anything to work with. But I take the sample yardage that the designer gives me from their sample, and I use it as the control, and then use the corresponding bust measurement or chest measurement or finish measurement, and then cross multiply and divide across all the other measurements to get the yardage for all those other
I do the same.
I think because the reason I've always broken it down is because like I never know if the ratio, do you just assume that the ratio between like all the measurements is going to be about consistent? And you
that's why I'm like loving what you're saying, because that's really interesting. Like if I take, okay, this sweater 46-inch size used X grams, and then I just cross multiply and divide for all the other sizes to get the yardage. But what you're saying is, say the smaller sample had less of one part or more, of another part, would it use a different amount of yardage for each section of the garment? That's really interesting.
Sure. Oh, so you just do it on the bust measurement?
Yeah. Right. It's an estimate though.
Yeah.
So from a tech editor standpoint, not a designer standpoint, if you just need to estimate that people are like within a range and it hasn't been tested yet, it's definitely a legitimate way.
And that's why we usually add a buffer. So like I'll get all those estimates from the cross multiplying and then round up a little bit.
Yes.
Like 15, between 5 and 20%, all designers kind of want a different buffer. Yeah. And then lots of the designers that I work with don't finalize any yardage until their test is complete.
Yes. Yeah.
And then they take all that information from their testers to put final numbers in their pattern.
Well,
but the estimates work pretty well. Like it's a good guide, and it gets you like, it gets you a good place to start, and then adding a little bit of a buffer is usually a good idea, just in case. Nothing like out of yarn.
I mean, I find I need to do that. So for my regular clients, I've started like helping them break down before they even start knitting the sample. I've started like telling them, okay, here are the points in general where you want to weigh, and send me all of those things and I'll calculate the yardage for you. But for most people, like they're not going to do that. They don't know that beforehand. So doing it the way that you're doing it is the only way to do it anyway. So it's helpful for me to learn, because like when people send me stuff and they're like, here you go, I'm like, you have one measurement. What do I do?
Yeah.
So like there's lots of measurements, but I mean
one yardage measurement.
Right. Oh, right.
Yeah. So if you only have just the yardage and you got to check it and see if it's even close, that's one way to do it, is just to use cross multiplication. So
yeah, sure.
Yeah, ratios.
Great.
Oh, we went down the way bunny trail, the yardage trail. Okay. Maybe we should throw you the next question.
Maybe we should add that question, because that wasn't even one of our questions.
I know. Sorry. Give you this.
No, that's fine. It's my fault. You asked for errors.
Says that made her math heart happy too.
Yeah,
she's another tech editor.
Yeah, Heather said Heather's another tech editor. She's in the chat, and she said, "Yes, my math heart is happy."
Nice. Sorry, I just need to mute whatever this thing is that's binging at me.
Oh, okay, no problem.
All good.
Cat is like scratching.
The cat is scratching. Let me in. Christine, you want to find the next question?
Sure. What advice would you give to a designer just starting out, besides weighing their sample and stages for your?
Oh, okay. Do you mean just for, like any advice, or in terms of writing the patterns?
Well, I mean, maybe as a designer and as a tech editor, what have you learned to be most valuable that a newer designer would be good for them to know, while they're beginning?
Sure. Okay. So there's two things, right? So from the actual design part, I would say like read a lot of patterns, just a lot of patterns. And it feels like it's okay. So it feels like it's changing a little bit. From what I can tell, back like ages ago, patterns were not very detailed. It was like, I feel like older knitters, yes, I feel like older knitters are a lot more hardcore than us, because they were just like, knit stockinette for 5 inches and then do this for that and add a border. And it's just like, oh, okay. And so now things have been broken down quite a bit so people can follow them more easily, which is how a lot of newer knitters these days are coming up with these like amazing sort of things that I never would have tried until I'd been knitting for 15 years. And it feels like it's coming around full circle again, because those newer knitters are starting to get really into things. They're writing designs that are less detailed, so they look a little bit more like the older school things. It's like more descriptions and less like actual abbreviations and acronyms and things. So this advice may be a little less important than it used to be, but I'd say just read a lot of patterns, like a lot of patterns, because there are just certain conventions that people expect and like certain sort of standard abbreviations that you just won't know until you read a lot of different patterns. And then from the actual, so that's from the like actual writing a pattern side, but from the actual like designing and general side, I'd say you really need to know why you're getting into it. So I worry sometimes that people see the really big designers and they're like, I'm going to be that, and I'm going to be famous, and everyone's going to make my designs. And like, obviously you want people to make your designs. You don't go into this sort of stuff without actually, like, the whole point of doing it is to share it, right? And so you want some people to make it, but the chance, or like the likelihood that you are going to be the next Stephen West is very low. Like, that's just the reality of it. And so you have to have a reason beyond that to actually start doing it. And so you have to just like really love it. Like, if you have a burning desire to like just get this stuff out into the world, like, go for it. But if you are doing it so that like everyone's going to be walking around at Rhinebeck wearing a sweater, it's just highly unlikely it's going to happen. So there's a lot of work that goes into actually getting the job of writing the design and the job of people knitting your design are two completely like different jobs. And you probably don't have the skills to do the latter as much as you do to actually writing the design, unless you're some sort of marketing guru already. But yeah,
I love it. That's really sweet. It's good to know your why. So
yes, yeah, definitely.
So that segues into this. What are you excited about as a designer, as a tech editor, as a teacher? What gets you excited?
I'm really liking tech editing. It's been really fun. So I started, okay, this is a bit of a longer story, so bear with me. So I had my daughter at the start of 2019 and I went on maternity leave and we were still living overseas. And when we decided to move back home, I was like, it sort of coincided with the end of my maternity leave, and my job that I was working at actually has an office here in Sydney. So they were like, look, you can just transition over to the Sydney office, but you need to find yourself a different job because you can't have exactly the same job as you had in New York. And so I was thinking about it. I'm like, we're moving country. My kid's going to have to go to daycare. I don't know if I want to do this. Like, finding a new job on top of all of that just seems like too much. And I've been wanting to do this for a really long time. So I was like, cool, I'm just going to try it. I'm finally going to bite the bullet and give it a shot. I'll do it for like a couple of days a week and see if we can put my daughter in daycare the rest of the time. And it's been great, but the main thing is that like I'm quite a people person, and so it's been really hard not having colleagues. I think one of the biggest transitions was just like working for yourself and not having anyone to work with. And so I think that's part of why I really like tech editing, because now I'm like working with people again, and it's like, yay, I have like people to collaborate with. It's not just me sitting on my computer all day by myself. So it's been nice.
I think we both have similar stories where we wanted to be home with
Yeah.
kids, and
Mhm.
but at the same time not quite all by ourselves. Maybe
Yes.
we want to work with people too, but yeah,
Mhm.
it's a wonderful way to have a career. So
Yeah. And it's good to have the flexibility, and it's nice that you don't have to be working with the people 24/7 in the same room, but you're still working with them.
except for those coworkers like the cat, the dog, the toddler,
Well, and we say a lot that the people, you know, the tech editors and designers that we work with are so important, because it, like you said, can be very isolating. You're at home by yourself, and it can be a very isolating job. So it is, that's the fun of it, is to get to know, like online,
right.
other tech editors and designers and people that are doing what you're doing, to have a community and people to work with. And like tech editing, yeah, you're working with the designer, right? You're working together, you're messaging back and forth, and you're working on it together. So you're not really all by yourself. So
Yeah, exactly. And in a similar vein, I've started, okay, so that like little rant that I had about design and marketing and things, I've discovered that I am not a marketing person. Like, this is part of why I have this rant.
hard.
You can't, you wouldn't be able to convince us of that.
Oh my gosh. I like my designs. I can write nice designs. I cannot get anyone to buy them to save my life. And so I have been trying real hard for the last 5 years, and it is not working. So I've actually transitioned mostly to working with magazines and stuff. So I write patterns for like subscription boxes and for nitpicks and things like that. And so in the same vein, like then you're also collaborating with the people on their end and their tech editors and like their testers and stuff. And so it's nice just like finding people to work with and not just doing it all yourself.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. So you teach, right?
Yes and no.
Yes and no. What do you like
Pandemic.
about teaching in that
Yeah.
part of your?
Yeah. So I was teaching until about June, and then lockdown.
Oh,
I don't want to go into too many details about what's been happening in Australia, but the shop that I taught at essentially closed for
oh, I'm sorry.
the last 6 months, and they haven't started. They've reopened, but they haven't started classes again.
Yeah.
But that's part of why I started YouTube as well, because I wanted to have my own sort of outlet for teaching too. And so I think I just love sharing. It sounds like a really weird, wishy-washy way of saying it, but like,
no,
not at all.
It was so much self-taught, pieced together random stuff. And like, I started doing this before YouTube was a thing, right? And so mom taught me, and that was lovely. Like, it's really nice to have that sort of generational stuff. But she got as far as teaching me how to knit and purl and cast on and bind off, and everything else was just like weird blogs from the early 2000s that I was trying to like watch, piece together the tutorials and things, and then like finding books and stuff and like scrambling together whatever knowledge I could. And so I like the idea of being able to like condense that down and help people now without them having to scramble and finding all these things.
That's a talent.
Yeah.
It's impressive.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I've always liked like I did a lot of mentorship and stuff in my old job and things like that, and I worked with a lot of high school and like uni students and things. So I was a math tutor in like when I was younger and stuff. So I think I would just always like teaching. So it's been easy to sort of segue it into knitting stuff.
It's fantastic.
Yeah. What would you like to see change in our industry from how things are now?
Yeah, honestly, this is the question that I was like worried about the most because I don't have a great.
Do you want to skip it? Like, no pressure.
Skip. No. I was thinking about it. So, okay. The reason I was worried about it is that because I watched your previous interview as well, and I know that there are people have a lot of deep thoughts right now about inclusivity stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And to be honest, I won't go too deep into this, but as someone who is usually at the other end of the inclusivity stuff, of like the sort of person who's trying to be included. It gets tiring talking about it all the time. So I will just leave it at that. I don't want to talk about like those, all of that
No
side
problem.
of things. I'm a little bit tired of having all those conversations. But I think the thing that I would like to see the most, other than that, is just in terms of pricing, I wish that people would appreciate more like the time and stuff that goes into writing a design, because just the like levels of, I don't want to be too disparaging, but you just see some very entitled behavior in terms of free patterns and price, like people charging for certain patterns and things. And I know that not everyone is like at a position where they can, you know, spend $10, $15 on a knitting pattern. But just like, I know how much my clients pay me for even just the tech editing part of it, let alone the amount of time that they've put into things. And so I just wish there was a little bit more of an acknowledgement or appreciation of how much like time and effort and, you know, just straight up cash goes into designing something. Because it is not,
it's a lot of work.
So much work. It's so much work. And so much just like, it's mental energy. Like when I'm working on a design, or even when I'm working on an edit, like I don't just sit at my computer and type some things, and like that, or even just sitting at the computer and typing takes a lot of time. Like while it's in the process, just like many mental minutes while I'm cooking, or while I'm playing with my daughter, or while I'm watching TV, like you're still sort of noodling on things in the back of your head. And so there's just a lot of effort and time that goes into these things. It'd be nice to just like, yeah, I really appreciated the designers who have been doing education around that. I've seen a lot of like blog posts and things recently that have been like, here are all the steps that go into it. This is why it's $15 and not $8 or not $5.
Well, and isn't it too bad that people need to defend that? Like,
yes,
that people need to say, this is all the work that goes into it, so it's worthy of what I'm charging. Like, you shouldn't have to say that, right? Like, you shouldn't have to defend yourself down to the ground why you're, you know, need to chart. Like, it is a lot of work, and like to have it be recognized in the price would be really nice.
And be valued. There should be a fair wage. I'm afraid there should be a fair wage for designers, not just.
Yeah. So. And it's even just other things. Like I've seen other designers who have like blogs, you know, they're sort of like, there are certain types of designers who have, it's just a blog and like all the patterns are free because they make their money from ads. And like, even then they'll get people who are being like, why are there so many ads? You shouldn't put ads on your site. It's like, guys, chill. You're already getting this for free.
Yeah. I think we need to have more conversations around price and value. Yeah. I think ultimately a lot in our industry is undervalued and underpriced. So
and it worries me a lot because especially for newer designers, it makes them devalue themselves to some extent. And like I find myself doing it too. Like I just released a pattern and I was like, I should really charge $12 for this, but I'm going to just charge 10 because no one will buy it. And like in reality, someone would have bought it. Oh my God, someone would have bought it. But I just like I couldn't make myself do it. It just didn't feel right, you know.
That's a really good point, that it does make you feel like devalue yourself, like you said.
Yeah.
It really does.
Yeah.
So I wonder if every designer releasing a pattern would charge twice of what they like. They charge $4 for a pattern. Maybe they charge $8. If things would slowly change in the industry, if people would charge more.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's something I hope I see soon.
Yeah, it'd be nice. It's just hard too because I feel like I don't know all the history behind it, but I get the feeling that the reason that it's like that is because yarn companies gave patterns out for free because they wanted to sell the yarn, right? And so
they still do that.
Yes, and that's the thing. I design for yarn companies now. They give my patterns out for free. Like once I have sold the pattern to them, oh, sweetie. Sorry.
That's okay. We totally understand.
Thank you, sweetie. Thank you. The lights are all going to fall over. Thanks.
Oh, so let's let me just pop in here real quick. And for those of you who are live with us now, if you all have a question that you'd like to ask Kat, throw it into the comments now. We have a few questions we got in via email and message. And for some reason, my thing is not focusing today. So if you have a question for Kat, throw it into the chat. Michelle says, I love that you teach because you want to share. So that was a nice comment.
I'm sorry about that. I just needed to avert a disaster. There were some lights that were about to fall.
Oh, I hope
Good
you're
job,
okay. We understand completely. We know all about the averting disasters in our
Yes. What was I saying? Oh yeah, just quickly. Yeah. So because I work with young companies and they they've given my patterns away for free. They pay me fine because they can and they should, but they then give the patterns away for free. So I worry sometimes if I'm just like helping exacerbate the issue, but got to sort of work in the system that you've got.
Exactly. We're going to take advantage of the fact that you are an Australian designer and ask you a technical question. What would a US tech editor need to know editing for an Australian designer? And what differences should I be aware of?
This is a question that we received.
This is a fantastic question.
Oh no, I know. Yeah, I know all about this. Okay, so first off, we use metric. So you have to make a choice whether you want to, and it's up to the designer too, whether you want to just convert everything using 2.5 or if you want to do the actual metric to 2 centimeter conversion. So when you give a gauge swatch, it's always this many stitches in 4 inches or 10 centimeters. And 4 inches is not exactly 10 centimeters. So 1 inch is 2.54 centimeters and 4 inches to 10 centimeters is 2.5, like exactly. And so you and the designer need to make a decision about whether you want to do the true conversion or if you want to do just the 2.5 conversion.
Exactly.
I tend to do the latter because if someone who's working in metric isn't going to take their gauge in inches and then go and use the metric things. They're going to be doing their gauge in the 10 centimeters. And so for all the math to really work out properly, you just have to make everything 2.5.
That's right.
Because otherwise, so that's what I do, but I know different people do it differently.
I need like a cheering like sound effect here.
Yeah, that's why we need applause.
So the biggest thing is the imperial to metric conversion. And then specifically for Australia, we use different terminology for yarn weights. It's really dumb. I don't like it, but we measure our yarn weights in ply. So a lot of Australians don't actually know what the like true meaning of ply is, because 2 ply is lace weight, then 4 ply is fingering, then 8 ply is DK. Like that's just how that's what we call our yarn weights.
Thinking about it.
Yeah, and so it doesn't matter what actual ply it is. So you can have a 8 ply, 4 ply yarn.
It's very confusing because, it can be confusing because it might not be that many plies in the yarn. Right.
Yeah. It actually makes it quite confusing for Aussie knitters too, because they don't know what ply means overseas. So like I had someone come into a class and she was like, I have the mystery yarn. I don't know what weight it is. I found on the internet that if I unravel the strands and count them, that will tell me the ply. I was like, oh, no, that's a different kind of ply. So it's the metric to imperial, and then also the fact that we call our yarn weight something different. And then the last thing is the needle size. So we use metric needle sizes as well.
Do you use British spellings of words like color or?
Yes, that too. Yeah. So sorry, I always go to the like technical side from the English side. I was like maths and numbers. Yes, from the writing side, we use British spelling, and for pretty much everything. And some of the terminology is different. So, given how much like American media we have over here, we know what a sweater is, but So the two big ones are sweater and hat. So here we would call that a jumper and a beanie.
Awesome.
Yeah. If you tell someone you're knitting a hat, they look at you really strangely because hat here means like a hat, like with a
Like
brim
a hat with
and
a brim and like a hat.
Yeah. I told my friend by accident after I moved back from the States, they're like, "What are you knitting?" I'm like, "A hat." They're like, "How?" I was like, "Oh, a beanie."
It's a beanie.
Awesome. That's awesome.
I'm making notes over here. I gotta make sure I use the right words.
Yeah. So sweater's a bit of a funny one because sweater is more of a all-encompassing term. Like we use more fine-grained words for stuff here. So you wouldn't call a cardigan a jumper, for example. So it's like I think the thing that we call jumper is basically just a pullover in the States. Yeah. And then like sweater vests, we just call it a vest, and a cardigan, you just call it a cardigan and stuff like that. So there's a little bit of like terminology that's different, but in terms of spelling, it's all British.
And it's all legitimate. So if an Australian designer,
so that as the tech editor, you're not correcting things that aren't wrong.
Right.
Exactly.
It's important.
So if an Australian designer decides to use beanie to describe everything in the pattern, you don't correct that back to hat.
Yes. Yeah. So it would be annoying.
That's good. That's good for us US tech editors to understand that doesn't change. You don't change people's words.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's good for me too to remember because sometimes I'll see stuff and I'll sometimes I put U's in places where they shouldn't be used.
Oh, I know. I know about that. I think Christine and I both have read a lot of British novels, so
I have a lot of clients in Australia.
Oh, cool.
So I didn't have anybody like you to ask. I know like this is their pattern. That's what they want. I know some people spell color COLOUR, so that's totally fine. And then I looked up a lot of stuff that I wasn't sure of. And like Sarah said, a lot of stuff I already knew because we've read all those books and, like grew up knowing that stuff. But yeah. And I think you have to put your hat, your cap on, right? Like if you're a US tech editor, you're doing a pattern that's from Australia. You have to remember that the metric numbers for needles and for sizing and for gauge is going to be given first.
Yes.
It's not going to be 4 inches and 10 centimeters. It's going to be 10 centimeters and 4 inches. So make sure you're not reversing that or confusing which number's going first, and make sure you're doing that in that order. You know what I mean?
And make sure that if they didn't put inches in at all, like if you may just have to know how to work in metric. Which
when I edit a pattern that's designed in metric, I'll do the metric for my edit and convert into inches.
Yes, sure.
I'll do the metric for my edit and convert into inches.
When
I first started tech editing, some designers didn't put inches and metric, but most people do now because it just makes your pattern that much more accessible to that many more people.
Right.
But that's kind of new. Like it didn't used to be like that. It didn't used to be that there was inches and metric in all patterns. That's relatively new.
Well, it's pretty funny from the other direction too. So I'm in this really big Facebook group here. There's like Australia's small enough that there is one big Facebook knitting group. There are, sort of 10 or 12,000 people in it now. And someone asked at one point how old everyone is. And I think the average age was about 60. And so there are a lot of people who are getting the other way around because it's like, the internet, like Ravelry was started in 2009. And so for someone who was learning how to knit in the 50s and 60s and stuff, they're all like, what is fingering?
Right.
Why are people calling things? Can't people just call things by ply? Why do we need to start calling things worsted and chunky and stuff? And so it goes both ways. It's really it's nice that the world is getting smaller and that we can all sort of talk to each other more across boundaries. But it just means that we have to figure out how to speak each other's languages too.
I agree. And how to communicate. Communicate cordially.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Well, there's only more to be gained by doing that.
Yeah,
and exactly. Learning more about how other people are doing things.
Yeah. And even just like having more access to, I don't know, there are not as a lot of Australian designers. If I could only design things that were designed, I mean, if I could only knit things that were designed in Australia, I would not have a lot to knit. So there are advantages to being able to be fluent in both.
So we had a question about communication. You want to find that, Christina?
Sure, here it is. How do you communicate expectations with your clients? Do you find that designers expect a perfect error-free pattern, and is that realistic?
Yeah, I will say what I think, but I think you guys should jump in too because you've been doing this all a lot longer than me. So I think the easiest thing for me, or like, I actually try and make sure I have a relationship with my clients. I'm the sort of person, I do have some clients who they just send me the pattern, I send them the edits, that's it. But part of like my style and working with Google Docs and stuff is that we can just go back and forth a lot. So I end up working with my clients like a lot on stuff. And I think having a relationship like that actually makes things like this easier. Because at that point, they know you, right? You're not just some like faceless robot checking the math on the other side of the screen. And so, like, since they know you are a person, then they know that, you know, people make mistakes and stuff.
Right.
And so I try and like make it sort of understood that like we're a team. Like you as a designer, me as the tech editor, and whoever you pull in to test edit or to test knit, like this is the team that is working on your design. And so you do your bit, I do my bit, we push it over to the testers. And if they find something too, then that's fine. Come back and we'll fix it together. Sort of thing.
I love it.
And so I find that makes it a lot easier to explain to people that, like, yes, if there's a mistake, I'm sorry there's a mistake, but that's also what the testing like process is part of too. So let's all like, you know, I will stay involved all the way up until you hit publish and even after if people find mistakes. And I think that makes it a bit easier to
well, and I think making that promise, I think making that promise that you're going to stay in it until they publish and that you're there for them if something goes wrong. I mean, that's really the only guarantee you can give, right? Because lots of people, you know, will ask, well, do you have a guarantee on your work or whatever? I mean, there's no way to, you can't know if you made a mistake, you wouldn't have made it if you knew you made it, right? It's really guarantee because if you wouldn't have put the mistake in, right? So obviously you're trying to guarantee your work being error-free, but you're a human being, and like you said, there's so much going back and forth. There's so much collaboration. The document has changed so many times in the course of an edit. And anytime you change a document, you're introducing error.
Yeah.
And it needs to be looked at again. And then the testers are going to get it. They may have some suggestions. So like probably the best you can do, what I say is that if a problem is found after we've finished working together, let me know and I will do everything I can to help you fix it.
Exactly.
And then that's on me. Like, and that's how I do it, because there's no real guarantee that you can give. You're a human being, and you know, but I think that promise of saying that I'm going to be with you until you publish is worthwhile. That's worth a lot. You know, that you're committing to them and to their pattern.
I think part of it is the expectation that you'll communicate.
Right.
Oh yeah.
Right. And that I know I've had to learn hard as a tech editor that I need to open up the door for communication. Like, you have an issue, you have a problem, this doesn't work, you find another error. Here's how you reach me. Here's, you know, my messaging. You can text me, and I think that's the expectation of communication is what makes that teamwork, that collaboration work really well.
Yeah,
for sure. Communicating is like such an important part.
Yeah, there is a bit of mental overhead. I get so many random things. It's like someone DMs me on Instagram, and then we keep the like thread going in email because it's more confusing, and then it suddenly jumps into the doc. So I mean, there are downsides to doing it this way, but it's better in general.
Yeah, I love the idea of collaborating to get a pattern to the best it can be with the many eyes that can be on it. So testers, designer, tech editors. That's what the teamwork is, what makes a pattern great. It's not just the tech editor that finds all the errors and fixes them. So
and it just makes your pattern better because like different people bring different things to the table. So like the tech editor will check all your maths and stuff, but like I'm not sitting here knitting it. Sometimes I like it so much that I end up volunteering to test. So I do end up knitting it. And like, oh my gosh, I was so embarrassed. Like I did the tech edit for someone. I jumped into her testing pool and then I found more errors as I was testing it. And I'm like, well, whoops.
That's happened to me, not as a tester, but I ended up knitting a pattern that I had edited and found a mistake. And I was like, oh my God. And it was a designer I knew really well. So I like ran to my phone. I was like, you're not going to believe this. Oh my God, stop the press. Like,
well, that's the beauty of like digital design though now.
No, it had already been published, but because like you said, Sarah, it's being printed when the person buys it, right?
Right.
So she could go in and edit it, but still, like some people had bought it. I was like, oh my God. But it's happened to me a couple times. Yeah.
It happens. We're human. We're not perfect. We're just human. So for anybody here who's live, if you have any questions to ask Kat, please throw it into the comments now because we just have a few minutes left. So we're going to ask. I know. Flies.
The time totally flew. Oh my gosh.
Okay, so we're going to ask you a fun question. What's your favorite yarn?
Oh no. It's like I only have one child, so I can't make the analogy about choosing between your kids. But I think cotton is really underrated.
Oh,
I wouldn't say it's my favorite, but I've knit a lot of kids stuff, and it's just so much easier. You don't have to worry about the parents washing it or putting it in the dryer, and like. I'm a new parent. I didn't want to hand wash anything. And also just in terms of like kids not being allergic or irritated to things and stuff. So I personally think cotton's really underrated. I have a lot of garments in cotton and they've been fine. Mm-hmm. So I reckon it's just nice because it doesn't get that cold here. So you need something to knit in summer.
Yes. And it can be thrown back into the washer and dryer and made back into shape really quickly.
Exactly. Yeah.
Doesn't take days to dry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Cotton it doesn't get as pilly either.
Yeah. Well, it depends on the cotton. I've worked with some pretty, there are some cottons that do. It was so funny. I made my daughter a shirt and it was red. And I took it off of her. And for a sec, I thought she had a rash or something because all around here and all under her arm, like all the friction points, essentially. I was like, oh my gosh, what's wrong? And then I looked and it was just like tiny little red cotton fibers. And I'm like, oops, let's not use that cotton anymore.
So Heather asks a great question. What's your favorite thing to design?
Yeah, I'm really into garments at the moment. So it doesn't show up in my Ravelry profile because it's fairly new, but I was too chicken for a really long time to actually make any garments because I didn't knit a lot of them and I used to hate skinny yarn. So I was like, for a really long time, I was like, nope, I'm not doing anything skinnier than a worsted weight. And so once I started knitting in 4-ply, in fingering, I was like, oh, maybe I should start trying to design some of this stuff. So I'm really liking making garments right now.
Oh, we can't wait to see.
So
what are you working on?
Something that you were afraid to do is now like your favorite thing to play around with. I think that's great.
Yeah. What am I working on? I'm not allowed to talk about it too much, actually.
Okay. Oh, that's all right. Just like give us the tech details. What's the construction? Top down?
Oh my gosh. So you know how I was saying earlier that sometimes I just jump in?
Yes.
I haven't found anything yet that I thought I've bitten off more than I can chew. And the thing that I'm currently working on, I think I've bitten off more than I can chew. So, actually, I've been wanting to talk to a tech editor about this. All right, I'm going to pick your brains for a sec.
Oh, shoot.
Okay.
Tell us.
If you have a drop shoulder and you want the drop shoulder to be consistent across sizes. So what I've done is I've taken the middle size and I've made that the one that just goes straight up. Mm-hmm. And in the smaller sizes, I've made it go out. And in the bigger sizes, I've made it. Is that right?
Yes.
Oh,
you did it.
Okay.
You figured it out.
Okay, good. All of this math is worth it then.
I was grading a design a little while back and I was like, this isn't going to work because then that seam has to end at the same place on every size.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what am I going to do? And so I figured out the same thing. And then I found a blog post by Isolde,
Yes.
designing
Inverleaf.
Inverleaf. And
Inverleaf.
she does this whole post with illustrations on how that works. I'm like, yay, it wasn't just
Yeah. There's a whole
Okay,
post
good.
on how doing the drop shoulder that way works.
Yes,
Yes,
it
okay.
worked.
Oh, thank goodness. Okay. Yeah, because I don't know if I did it too. I took the middle size and I figured out the ratio between the shoulders and the bust. And then I took that ratio and applied it across all the sizes. And so it made it go out in the smaller ones. And
Yes.
so that's very good.
Yeah,
Okay.
It gets tricky if there's like patterning here.
Yeah, that's the bit that I've bitten off more than I can chew.
You'll
Come
figure
back
it
to
out.
me. Come back to me in about 6 months. I will show you guys what it was.
You are totally going to get this. You did not bite off more than you can chew. It feels like it, but after talking to you for this hour, I know there's no doubt you've got this. You've got this.
Exactly. So,
Well, thank you for answering my question.
well, we're just about out of time, so we wanted to thank you, Kat, for being with
No,
us
it's been
today.
lovely.
It was so much fun talking to you and hearing your answers and hearing you chat about all the things that we find fascinating. So thank you
Yeah,
for being
no,
with
it's really
us.
cool. I actually
Before you go, are you
yes.
taking new clients? And if
Oh,
so,
yeah.
how can people find you? And how
Yeah,
can
yeah.
people find your designs? What's the best way for people to find you? And we'll put it in the information in our video.
Yes, sure. So I am taking on new clients, definitely. I am full up until the end of this month, but then I'll be free at the start of December and onwards. So I am oliphantcat.com.au, and there is a dedicated tech editing space there. So I will send you guys a link. And then on Ravel, the best place to find my designs is on Ravelry, and I'm just Katrina Walser there.
Awesome.
And then I'm like most active on Instagram. So that is just at oliphantcat.
Okay.
Which is wonderful. Thank you so much for being here.
It was great talking to you. I'm so excited to meet you. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Talk to you later.
We'll see you soon. Bye, Kat. So thanks for joining us today for Tech Tip Talk. We have some announcements, right?
Next month, we are on December 20th. Our talk will be December 20th. Oh, did you want different announcements first?
No, that's perfect. Shoot, I'll put up the banner.
Okay, next month, December 20th is our Tech Tip Talk. We're going to do a Q&A with Tian Connaughton, and we're really excited. She is a knitting designer. She's a teacher. She's a coach. She's a tech editor. She's extraordinary. So we're really excited about our talk with her.
I'm super excited. So I hope you will join us next month. We'll be back at the same time at 1 p.m. Eastern time. And
12 p.m. Eastern.
Sorry, noon Eastern time. Leave it to me to get the time wrong. And what else do we have to mention here? Right? Subscribe? Yeah, subscribe here to our YouTube channel. And you'll get a reminder when we go live. And
remember that you can always leave a comment on the live broadcast that is posted before we do the broadcast. So you can put your questions in ahead of time.
Mm-hmm. And you can send us an email. Go to our link in our profile and sign up for our newsletter. We have a free pre-edit pattern checklist for you designers who are out there getting started designing and looking for a tech editor. So let us know what questions you have for Tian. And for us, we answer all kinds of questions about knitting, pattern writing, or tech editing, or anything about knitting, I suppose, knitting construction, especially the nerdy, mathy bits.
And thank you all for joining us tonight. It's really fun. We love being here and answering your questions, chatting with you guys. It's our favorite part of the month.
And we'll see you next month on December 20th. Take care. Bye.
Bye.